the moment for me that kind of changed things around is I got up out of bed, grabbed the pill, or I reached over to grab a pill and there wasn't one there, which is really unlike me because I used to have them on my nightstand. So I had to walk to the bathroom. I took a pill out, took it, drank some water, and I shut the glass, like on the cabinet.
Yeah.
And that cabinet shined into my room. And that was the first time in years that I actually saw myself.
Yeah.
And that also shined into my room. And it gave me a glimpse of what I was living in. I'm like, you're living in a crack house.
Yeah.
Your house is a disaster, bro. You're off. And so I remember, like, I'm an A-type guy, right? I get fired up. I was so mad at where I had come. I grabbed the cabinet, opened it up, and then I grabbed every single one of my pills, and I dumped them and flushed it. Wow. But then I'm
That's
like,
serious.
Oh my God.
What did I just do?
I did, man. If I had a scuba suit, I probably would have tried to get down in there because I started to panic. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never been through withdrawals.
It's super awesome to meet you in person. And for everybody who doesn't know, this is my friend Brock, and he's gonna give you the rest. So if you'll just tell folks, what is your name? Where are we? And where are we?
Yeah.
What city and state? And where are we?
Yeah. So my name is Brock Bevel,
Yeah.
and I own Victory Recovery, which this is it, man. So this came about a year and a half ago. My partner, Max Hall, played at BYU, played for the Cardinals. My wife knew his story and said, hey, do you know a guy named Max? And I remember seeing Max on the news. Mm-hmm. So Max he had just finished playing with the Arizona Cardinals, maybe 2 or 3 years removed from them. And I woke up one morning and I saw Max on the news with a BYU shirt. Mm. And I remember thinking, and it said he was arrested for drugs and shoplifting. And I thought in my head, what a dick. You know what I mean? Yeah. That was just my thought. I know that's not probably the right term, but that was my thinking.
Yeah.
Like, who is this guy? Yeah. And not knowing that years later, him and I were going to connect on a podcast. And
is that where you met?
Yeah, I did. Same way we met.
On Chase the Base?
Chase the Base.
Okay.
My wife's like, why don't you just interview Max? And I was like, well, so I sent him a couple messages. He didn't answer. And finally, I sent him kind of a crude message like, hey, dude, what the hell? You're not going to respond. Me kind of messing around with him.
Too good to talk
to me.
Too
good to talk to me. And he hit me back and said, hey, you know what? I don't usually do podcasts. I'm still kind of struggling a little bit with who I am, like coming out of addiction. And he had been out of addiction a few years. And he said, hey, I just decided to start saying yes to people.
Yeah.
And so I'm coming on. And so him and I hit it off and we started the podcast and we said the Agents of Recovery podcast that I do at Blue. And so it just kind of like morphed into this progress. And we decided that we wanted to do a recovery program. You were standing or sitting in downtown Mesa, which is 5 minutes from the police station. You're 5 minutes from our local parks, which is the biggest drug-infested addiction place in Mesa. And the reason we picked here is because I'm a retired police officer. I was actually injured about 2 miles from here, where I was struck and run over, and that's kind of where my cycle of addiction began, was being run over. And so I was just like, this is where I want to be. I want to affect the community. I want to be a part of the community. I was born here. Wasn't raised in Mesa, but I was born in the hospital right down the street. So that's why we're here. And that's why we picked this location.
Well, thank you so much for all of that. And I think people are probably going like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So let's talk about it a little bit. So you are were a career police officer.
I was.
Yeah. So when did you decide to join the police force and why?
So I got on in 1997.
How old were you?
I was 22, 23.
Okay.
Yeah. But let me back up. I was a little kid, about 5 years old, and I was snooping in my dad's closet. Yeah. And I got to the back of the closet, usually where our parents used to keep their guns.
Yeah.
Right? And I see this plastic covered suit. I'm like, what's this? And I pulled it out, and there was this Mesa police uniform. And that was the first time that I knew that my dad had been a police officer. He'd since changed his career, and he was in education and a coach and like flourishing, right?
Yeah.
But I took it all out by myself in the room, and I put his uniform on, and the thing was hanging off. But I just remember that like feeling of power.
Yeah.
I'm like, I love this, and I look good in it, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm 6 years old. But at that point, I said, I'm gonna be a cop. I want to be a police officer, whatever
So
this
you
feeling is.
knew at 5 or 6 what
Yeah.
you wanted to do with your life.
I did, which was crazy because I don't think most people get that lucky, but
Oh,
did. Yeah.
same. I knew at a really young age too.
I wanted to.
Yeah.
So I just, and it wasn't something I pursued. It was actually, I wanted to play college football, got a scholarship, ended up going on a mission for my church, came home.
Yeah.
I was working in a plumbing company. I'm like, this sucks. I'm not a plumber. Mesa Police were hiring. So I went and tested with 500 and something people.
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't know, like when you feel like you're out of place.
Yeah.
Like I'm walking amongst these monster men and career guys, and they all have their pants blouse and they look good. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just came from my job to take my test. You know, I'm in street clothes anyways. I went and took the test, and I remember, check this out. So back in when we took it, you're in this big amphitheater, and it's a bubble sheet.
Yeah.
And so you have to, when you're done taking the test, you have to take it back to the people, right? The police officers, they grade your test. And they say, walk outside, and then we'll let you know if you passed.
Yeah.
So outside, all of us were forming up, and they would call your name. And if you passed, you go this way. And if you fell, you take the walk of shame past everybody. And I'm like, okay, God, I don't care if I get on the department. I just don't want to take the walk of shame.
Yeah.
So anyways, I passed the test, and I got lucky. And
Yeah.
out of 500 something people, there were 7 taken out of that class, and I was one of them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. So you mentioned that you went on a mission. So I'm guessing, and not to, throw you out there under the bus, but so I'm guessing you're LDS.
I am.
Yeah. And so you were raised in the church.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we just, we've gotten an opportunity to talk to a few different people here in Arizona.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, and so we share that commonality, which we've already known, but,
sure.
the folks that are watching this don't know. So,
Yeah, but it's, for me, it's exciting to talk to church, to other members, however
Yes.
you want to call it, because I feel like, and hopefully people that listen to this in any religion, I feel like there's a stigma.
Yeah.
Well, especially when you start talking about real topics that you've heard today.
Yes.
Right? And we kind of brush them under the table, and our secrets keep us sick.
I think so. They grow bigger in the dark.
Yeah. And I always say I had this monster under my bed that I just pacified and I fed, and as long as it stayed under the bed, nobody knew about it, nobody cared. My addiction just grew, and I wish more people were courageous and that would come out and say, hey, I'm struggling with this.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet. And I don't think any church is there yet. I don't know. Maybe there are, but I think that's a very hard topic.
Yeah, I think so too. I actually agree with you 100%. And I talk about this actually quite openly, especially with the women in the church, that I've noticed, and it feels very painful to me as an onlooker, even though I'm also a member, but not being somebody that grew up in the church, how hard it is for women who are raised in the church to be able to identify out loud certain things. And you can really see how it impacts their ability to sort of release, right, those burdens that are held under the bed. And I think that stuff becomes really problematic. So it's quite fascinating to me, sort of tangential, I guess. And I was thinking about this earlier, how many people, because I'm the first one to say it, I will stereotype somebody. If they say Utah, I identify it as LDS, right? And so I'm like, hey, are you LDS? Because I am, if you look at me on appearance, the last person you would think would be a member of the church. However, I was baptized in 2017. And I'm grateful. I am so grateful to be a member for so many different reasons. And so it's nice to have that identification.
Yeah, but if you look at us, I mean, you see the tattoos, and right? And the first thing is they got to be not a follower of Christ.
Right.
For me, that's where I think a lot of religious sects get it twisted.
Absolutely.
Because if you saw us in Walmart, the last thing they're going to say is, hey, you're LDS and you're an addict.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that's what I kind of giggle at.
Me too, and I love it. Actually, I really love it. And honestly, the longer I remain a member, the more grateful I am for the experience that I have and where I came from.
Totally.
Right, and how I recognize. And I was talking to Laura about this a little bit earlier, but how I recognize the necessity of everyone, right? Myself, and then also members that I've engaged with. Whereas at one point, I kind of felt like an outcast based on my own perception, right? But today I get to see how we all bless each other's lives by being connected. So,
well, it's a taboo topic, right?
Absolutely.
So you're a woman and I'm a man, and like it's almost like it's taboo. It's not something we're supposed to talk about, which I think is just.
I think that's the detriment.
Totally.
I think it's the detriment. I think, and
that's what kept me sick so long.
oh, absolutely.
And I'm not saying it's because of the church or anything, but I'm saying because of my own compass.
Right.
Because of my own fear, embarrassment, shame, guilt
Right.
that I put on myself. That
Right.
We
often don't check what's going on in between these things with anybody else, right? We create our own reality based on what we hear other people around us saying, or just the experiences that we have. I have a friend in recovery, and he always says, how free do you want to be? How free do you want to be? Because that's how transparent we become, right?
Wow.
So I just kind of lived by that. And, over the last number of years, it's just been a thing where it's like, I'm not really doing this for anybody else. I'm doing this to set myself free. I'm doing this so that I live in the black, right? And because I cannot pour from an empty cup.
Well, proud of you.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
hard.
proud of you.
It's hard. It's hard. We're an anomaly.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense. Especially being in recovery and a member of the church. And I mean, I know this is what it's about, but it's
honestly, this is about all of the things.
It's an anomaly because this is what I want to talk about in church. We sit, and this is going to come out probably wrong, and maybe this isn't the place, but I feel, in my opinion, where we need to start is amongst the men. I think a lot of the trauma, a lot of the detriment in the church lies within the men in my building, right? And I'm including that, where we hear these discussions and we don't do anything about it. We hear them. It's like the scripture in John where it says, "Be a doer of the word, not a hearer," right?
Yeah.
And I think about that, and I look closely, and I was like, am I just a hearer of it, or am I a doer?
Yeah.
And so I wish there were more people doing it instead of just hearing it and then going home and living that 7 days and wash, rinse, and repeat. So that's just, for me, something I really want to work on.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think that sometimes, even though we think we understand concepts and processes, and vocabulary makes sense to an extent, we don't always know how to put it into practice, right? And that sometimes we just need to see another person do that. And so I think that the more that we do have these conversations out loud, and we do present, even if we're not like really sure how to execute on something, that at least we move forward in that direction, and then we become examples to other people, and it makes it okay for those things to happen, if that makes sense.
And I think a prime example, when we use definitions and words that we hear, you hear the word atonement or repentance, forgiveness, I didn't, and one of the coolest things I think that I've taken away from my own addiction is I didn't understand that relationship with Christ until I went through that, until I was on the bathroom floor suffering for those 7 days, right? We go to church and we hear these terms. I'm like, yeah, I believe in that. I know that, but it's not intimate. It's not personal.
It's here. It's not here.
Yeah. Until you go through that and you're like, oh my gosh, like that relationship now, even after 7 days, is totally different.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that we intellectualize a lot of things. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times, it's specifically with jargon, right? And we can just call those words jargon that we use in specific settings. And there's not, that relationship doesn't exist with the heart or with the spirit, right? It's like the intellect. Yes, those are things that we've repetitively heard. We've repeated them more and more times than I would ever care to even talk about. But even with understanding the vocabulary, not really understanding the meaning behind that, if that makes sense. So, yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things that fascinated me and moved me about the very first time we ever interacted, which is when you invited me on Chase the Vase, was finding out that not only were you a police officer, but you were also a drug addict.
Yeah.
So, I would, let's explore that a little bit. Like, how did that happen? How long were you on the police force and what happened?
Yeah. If you don't mind, I want to back up. We didn't talk about addiction growing up. I didn't know what addiction was. I didn't know about any of that. My actual first taste of addiction was when I was 8 and I saw pornography.
Okay.
So at 8 years old, I felt.
I like it that you're actually bringing this.
Yeah, it's like it was, because it plays a role in my other addiction, right?
Yeah.
But the first time I saw pornography, I felt that there was this hook.
Yeah.
Like my brain was hooked. My brother and I, really quick story, we walk out to the trash. Back in the day, you had to walk back out of your yard. There was an alley. There was a big trash can out there. And there was this box of magazines. Both of us were avid sports guys. We opened it up, and there's about 100 Playboy magazines. Oh. We had never seen a Playboy. In your garbage can? Yeah, in our garbage can. Oh. But it was a shared garbage can with like 4 different neighbors.
Okay.
And my brother's 2 years older than me. And I remember taking the magazine out and flipped right to the centerfold. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And my brother kind of smacks it and hits it and goes, hey, we don't look at that stuff. And that didn't make sense to me because I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, we do. Because I'm looking at it.
I'd like to check that out again.
I'd like to see more of this. But he was so good. He was such a great guy. He still is today. He hasn't changed at all. But what was crazy about addiction is on that one moment of seeing that picture, was hooked.
Yeah.
And I can't explain, like, the dopamine dump. Like, my mouth started salivating. My hands started getting sweaty. And I said, oh yeah, we don't look at this. And I closed it. We threw it back in there. But all I could do was walking into the house, and in the house was, how can I sneak back out there and get that magazine? Because it has such a pull on me. Yeah. So I'm having this tactical plan, how I'm going to sneak out at 8 years old. I snuck out there, grabbed 2 magazines, stuck it in these bags, and went and put it under a tree.
Yeah.
In the alley. And then for the next 2 years, I looked at the same Playboy magazines over and over, read every single forum. Like, I couldn't memorize that thing. I still today remember every single picture in that magazine, those 2 magazines, which is crazy, right? So I struggled from 8 years old.
So let me ask you this, because I'm thinking about my husband, who was also raised in the church, who also had some similar addictions. It's just really fascinating because it's making my synapses in the brain, or whatever the heck you call it, is going crazy. Were there other things that you engaged in as a kid that piqued your interest like that? Explosives, fire, any of those kind of things?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing that had that hook on me. Because we were avid sports. My dad coached football, high school baseball. I mean, he was so a lot of my energy I was either in sports.
Yeah. So that was your secret thing.
That was my secret. Oh, it was hidden. I mean, hidden. And that's what kept me sick. When we talk about these secrets, now here's what the problem was. I'm looking at 8 years old. And then at 12 years old, I'm supposed to get that next progress in the church. And then at 14 and 16.
Had you been baptized yet?
No, I hadn't.
Okay.
But I do remember the bishop, you want to call it, he's like, hey, do you have any problems with this stuff? And I'm like, no. Mm-hmm. No. Mm-hmm. And then the problem is now you're 12 and they're asking the same questions. Well, when I was 8, I lied about it.
Right.
Well, I can't come out now.
So, because you're carrying this shame.
I'm carrying this shame, and I knew it was wrong. And then it turns into masturbation, and now you're just progressively getting worse.
Right. Now you're just a bad kid.
Now I'm a bad kid, a horrible kid, and I couldn't talk to anybody about it. And then now at 16, you have another interview, and I've lied from 8 to 12 to 16. Now I'm getting ready to go on my mission. I'm like, I've lied this long.
And how old were you when you were baptized?
8.
Oh, you were 8.
Yeah, I was 8. So all these years I've lied about it, and like you talk about shame and guilt and all that trauma, and I'm like, and it was all on me. It wasn't anybody else's fault. I didn't have an outlet. I didn't have anybody to talk to.
Let me ask you, and sorry to interject, let me ask you a Holy Spirit question. So with all of the, teaching of the Holy Spirit, and we start talking about that at baptism. I mean, that's one of the talks that's given. Did you have an intellectual connection with the understanding of that? And did you feel like you were being dishonest in that regard with something that
Absolutely. I knew, like,
Yeah.
it was this good evil battle that I knew that every time I looked at it, it turned to masturbation, and that I felt that shame.
And God knew because
Yeah,
the Holy
he knew it.
Spirit's in you, and you've been
Yeah.
educated on what that
I knew it
looks
was
like,
wrong,
and you were a bad
and
kid.
I felt horrible.
Yeah.
I felt like shameful. So I'm just carrying that guilt around all the time. And you know, you talk about the addiction cycle, but the crazy part was my addiction cycle at first took a long time to get around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I looked at the pornography maybe, or the magazine maybe once a week.
Yeah.
And then it turned into once a day, and then it turned to hourly, and you know what I'm saying? So this thing just sped up. So now the guilt and shame's getting shorter and shorter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And
What about on the other side of it? Now, academics, sports, and things like that. Were you excelling in those
in
areas?
sports? I was excellent.
Yeah.
Academic, my ADHD kicked in, so I was getting extra help.
Yeah.
But most of it, I was a good kid. I just couldn't focus. Man. I was so energetic.
And you just had this dark little
Yeah, and then I had this dark little secret. Like, I was just pacifying this monster.
Right.
And it was growing and growing. I'm like, okay, now how do you let this thing out? Because you've lied for so long. You can't let it out.
Right.
Then you're going on a mission. Now you're getting married. And I remember when I was getting married, I'm like, do I tell her? Like, and then I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not going to have to masturbate anymore. I'm not going to have to look at porn anymore because now I'm getting married.
So I don't need to talk about it.
I don't, you know, that sex is just going to equate to what I'm seeing with her. And crazy enough, it didn't. Like, I just continue to pursue it.
Yeah.
Which was crazy. So let's go with the police department. I'm battling this. I never had any problems at work or anything.
You went to work at the police department after your marriage.
Yeah. So we were married about a year and a half, 2 years.
and then
I became a police officer and loved it. Yeah. And of course, the energy, like the dopamine dump had changed. I wasn't looking at pornography as much, but it was still in there.
I could see where there would be kind of a transfer.
Yeah,
because now you're doing an exciting job where it's very diverse and it changes every day.
And I'm married.
And you're married,
so I didn't
and
have
it's
to
dangerous.
And so that was kind of a thing. But now I remember, so let's go to the event. I was actually run over. Long story short.
And how long had you been a police officer when this happened?
Man, 6 years probably. It was like April 11th, I think 2001.
Okay.
A prostitute who was our confidential informant stops us on the road and says, "Hey, I got to tell you about this. I can't handle it. I need to let you know that a lady is bringing her daughter to this scene, and she's going to traffic the daughter in exchange for drugs. Mm-hmm. So I cannot let this happen." She's a prostitute, right? And she knows what's going to start happening to this girl. So she's like, "I can't let it. So can you guys intervene?" And you know how street level stuff is. It's never correct. It's never on time. Like, you're waiting for that doper standard time. When's she going to show up? When's the truck going to show up? But it was to the time. The Z71 pickup truck gets there. A female's driving. There's a female in the passenger seat. This guy, Bobby, the drug dealer's going to be driving down the street, riding his bicycle. He's going to come to the passenger side. She's like whole thing. Yeah. And all of a sudden, it's playing out. It's happening. We're like, holy crap, let's go.
Yeah.
So my partner and I roll up on the scene. And I get to the right side, and my partner's on the left, and I'm just going to speed it up a little bit. He gets in an argument with her, and she throws the truck in reverse, and I'm at the back right tire. It runs over my foot, and I go to get out of the way. It's on top of my foot, and I turn, and it snaps my ankle.
Oh.
And then I go to step, and she hits me right there on the knee and just blows my knee out. You remember the Stretch Armstrong toy that we used to play with? Mm-hmm. That's what my knee looked like for a second. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my knee's hitting the ground.
Yeah.
And we jump up, adrenaline's going, draw down on her. She gives up, and we take her to jail. And then I go to the hospital, and then my recovery starts. And I remember I had a doctor, Dr. Levine, great guy, loved him. And he was my doctor, my orthopedic. And I remember I had such a great relationship with him, Ginny, that I would sit down with him. He's like, "Hey, Brock, you're a cop. You're never going to get addicted to this stuff, okay?" Okay. I didn't know. Like, wait a minute. You're saying I'm a cop? Doctor. So being a cop
means that
controls the addiction. I'm like, cool. And I remember taking it, and I was in rehab, trying to get back to work.
Yeah.
And finally, I was doing really well. Finally, the department looked at my medical notes, and the doctor says, "Hey, this guy will never be stable, never going to be able to come back to work, so he needs to retire. So they call me up. I go in there. I'm sitting in this boardroom, and they hit me with, hey, we need to retire you. You're not fit for duty. And I'm like, what? And so they have the medical note, so that was their decision. And I remember that night, they're like, bring all your gear in. You can keep your gun for $1. You can keep your badge. We'll give you a retirement badge, but everything else you got to bring in. And the hardest thing to give up were my keys. Yeah. Like, why? You know, you're thinking, why would my keys? Because I had to turn everything in. My key fob, my keys, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not a cop anymore. Like, I can't just walk in the back of the station and like, if I'm going to come see my guys, I got to call them. They got to come down. Like, this whole mess in my head. So it's about a month into retirement, and I'm a mess. I'm like, where are my dudes at? Like, I was just battling with you. I was just getting shootings with these guys. And like, we had all these cases, and what's going, like, they don't call me. And so I went in some mad depression. Yeah. And it was my identity. My world had been rocked. Yeah. I didn't know who I was. Like, I'm no longer a cop. And now I'm home changing. I have young kids, and I'm changing their diapers. I'm like, wait a minute. A month ago, I was out there chasing bad guys, and now I don't know who the hell I am. Yeah. So then I noticed as I start taking those medications more, that same hook that I felt that night with the pornography was happening in my brain. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I love this feeling. The more I take, the better I feel. Yeah. So it wasn't like,
don't feel.
Yeah, don't feel. So I noticed the more I took, the less I was worried about, hey, my dudes are calling, nobody's calling, nobody cares. Yeah. I'm retired. And
something was there for you.
Yeah, and now it's going away. And so I just started taking more and more. Yeah. And that addiction lasted for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that a little bit. So it starts out, you're easing the pain and taking care of poopy diapers.
I mean, it was easy for me, right? I'm like, if anybody ever questioned.
And the doctors, how long did they just openly prescribe?
Well, so I had a hand injury, so I blew this hand out, so it's a fake knuckle. Okay. I broke my ankle, and I had my knee, so I had 2 different doctors. Okay. So I was just, hey, doc, that's not working for me. Can you up it or can you lower it? And I go, this doctor, hey, can you up it? Yeah. So I was coming home with like 390 pills. These big old bottles of pills, yeah. Yeah.
So what were they prescribing for you?
Oxys.
Okay, oxycodone, Oxycontin?
Oxycontin, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so
you had the real deal?
Yeah, I was the real deal, yeah. And I was popping them, and then I would go in there and say,
when did you start abusing them? Or did you? Did you just stay on your prescription?
No. I started eating those. So. And I didn't think it was abuse. Like, you couldn't tell me it was abusing them because, look, wait.
The doctor
look at all these injuries, man. Look, I have my knee surgery. Look at my hand surgery. And so, like, if anybody ever questioned me, I'm like, no, dude,
you're not an addict.
I'm a cop. I can't get addicted to these things. Right. And, and the crazy part was...
the sky's purple.
Yeah. And no, I didn't let anybody talk to me, but as my addiction with the pills grew, my addiction with pornography grew. Okay. And so that was where I started like making really bad decisions in my relationship with my wife, right? And the more I covered it with the pills, the more I could do the stuff on the side. Like I ended up cheating on her, and we ended up getting divorced, and she got custody of the kids. It was like because of my actions based on addiction. Because when I wasn't addicted, I wasn't.
You didn't have those problems. Yeah. Yeah. So how long did it take from inception of injury to divorce?
I want to say about 3-4 years. Okay. Yeah, she put up with a lot of crap. Yeah. Yeah, and I have to own that. I think that's hard,
folks
right?
that are in the church don't really get married to get divorced. So
yeah,
I'm sure she did.
Yeah, and I could pass blame all day. Right. On her, but I mean, it's fine.
First of all, it takes 2, right? Yeah. But I mean, none of us get married to get divorced. Yeah. So of course she stuck around for a long time.
Because all the shame had built up. Like I had never told anybody I struggled with pornography.
Right.
She knew because like she was finding pictures, and the whole nine started coming out, unraveling on me.
And did you guys have conversations around that stuff?
Lies. Yeah. She would catch me, and I'd be like, I'm maniacal. I was an undercover cop. I could talk my way out of a bag. You know what I mean? Right. Like, I was so good at communicating.
How long do you think she bought it for?
She never bought it. Okay. I think she pacified me, okay. And I think maybe at first she kind of like, oh, that maybe kid, okay. But she got to the point where she just got tired of it. Yeah. Yeah, my lies were just bigger and bigger. And she's like, wait a minute, I have the picture.
Yeah.
Well, that's not me. You know, like.
Oh, that one worked on me a couple times early
like
on.
all that crazy stuff. And like,
Yeah.
it was bad, man. But here were the problems is I didn't talk about it. I had nobody to talk to. No, I mean, I probably did, but I didn't.
I don't think talking about it is a natural occurrence for most of us.
No. And then I'm like, okay, I remember I cheated on her, and the church came and brought me this letter saying you're going to be, you have to go for this meeting. You're probably going to be excommunicated. The guy that gave me the letter was like, and I'm in this little tiny small town. He's like, you're going to be excommunicated for what you did. I'm like, who are you? And how do you know that? So anyways, I go to I get excommunicated from the church and then this fellowship and all that. I mean, it was a crazy ride.
Yeah.
But I remember my whole thought process was, I can't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Can't talk to anybody, don't share. And all these years of guilt and shame mounted up onto the day that I got to drop it off. And I remember walking in, I'm just like, I'm broken.
Yeah.
I am broken. I'm finally going to tell somebody. I'm like, and I think about the story of the prodigal son.
Yeah.
And nobody talks about his walk back. Right? That he had that rock bottom moment where he's eating the food with the swine. He's in crap. And he's like, okay, I'm going to go back to my dad. I'm going to have the conversation with my dad that he can just put me to work. Yeah. But we don't know how long that walk lasted. And how much time that he had to contemplate.
Well, how small he felt on the walk in,
yeah,
right?
And like, hey, he's giving everything up. And I remember walking in there feeling like that, like, man,
I was wrong.
I don't know if I can do this. Yeah. I remember saying, Bev, nobody's making you do this. Like, turn around and just go back.
Yeah.
But I do remember that the guy that I gave it to, the bishop that I gave it to, I needed to give it up. I needed to just, and I just told him everything. So from 8 years old up to this point, and I'm just like, I never looked at him.
How did you feel?
Well, that's the thing. I never looked at him. I was like, I'm going to tell you all this stuff, and I didn't want to look up because I just knew in my mind that he was like,
shaming.
Just oh my gosh, I can't believe you did this.
Yeah.
And it was the coolest thing. I looked up at him, and he's crying, and I'm crying, and he said, "I love you, man." That took a lot of courage. And that was the conversation, and we walked out. You know what I mean? And he hugged me, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I made these lies up for all my life.
Yeah.
That I was gonna be this horrible person, and the way he handled was such a Christ-like way. And and it was so refreshing. I was appreciative of it. I still had to go through the actions, but guess what? All that was gone. It was all out there.
Oh my gosh,
and
what a relief,
I couldn't pick it back up
right?
and put it back in my backpack and take it home with me. It was out. I'm like, oh. I remember walking out of there just like, wow.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
So that was kind of that opportunity to.
The pinnacle moment.
Yeah. I mean, it was for the spiritual component of me, right?
Yeah.
The spiritual, like.
Well, it's heavy.
Yeah.
It's a heavy place. I was having a conversation with my daughter recently, and she kind of gave up, carrying a couple of different burdens around. And I was like, yeah, it's so heavy to carry that, isn't it? And
yeah,
it's a heavy load.
You know what? I tell people this, and I think this is super important for people to understand. It's like pornography is a spiritual addiction.
Oh, yeah.
Where I think my pill addiction was more physical.
Yeah.
Right? It was physical. It had a physical component, a physical hook on me.
Right.
It didn't have a spiritual hook on me.
Yeah.
But the shame from pornography and the shame from the pills were totally different.
Yeah.
And people were like, what is that? I don't even know what that means. But I felt guilty.
Yeah.
For the pornography. I never felt shame for using a pill. Because in my mind, I'm like, dude, I'm injured.
Yeah.
I can take this stuff.
Yeah.
Until I did.
I
until
think
I came
honestly,
to the
Brock, that's indicative of, so with everything I teach, it's that we have to change the messaging, right? So it's based on what we say to ourselves. And so when we identify shame with certain behaviors, right, we have to recognize that we're consistently giving ourselves this message: you're bad, you're wrong, you're bad, you're wrong, you're bad, you're wrong. If you were convinced from the beginning that the drug use was not shameful, that wasn't you, that you're a cop and cops don't get addicted. And so you were repeating a different message to yourself. I would argue that, you know,
for a minute.
Yeah.
Then I started taking some of my pills and giving them to my buddy, and then my buddy would take them down and sell them for me and bring them back. So like we don't talk about everything. Yeah. So yeah, totally. Like I got into.
But do you know what I'm
totally
saying
get it.
though?
Yeah.
But then I think also about just different levels of addiction, where when it just comes to the drug use, and I think this is sort of the message that goes around our society. Addiction in itself isn't the crime, right? It's the things associated that we do as a result of the addiction. And when we know those things are wrong and bad, I think they carry this whole other level of shame, right? And
Absolutely.
So, yeah, no, I always enjoy our conversations every time we get an opportunity to have one. Okay, so you spiral out of control, your life goes to crap, your wife leaves you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
I'm lonely.
yeah.
I'm in my house.
You're a cop in your house.
Well, no, I'm retired.
I mean, a retired cop. But this is the thing. Once a cop, always a cop. So there's that.
You know, when it was a lonely time, and I got to a point where like, I don't know if I can beat this.
Who are you?
And the moment for me that kind of changed things around is I got up out of bed, grabbed the pill, or I reached over to grab a pill, and there wasn't one there, which is really unlike me because I used to have them on my nightstand. So I had to walk to the bathroom. I took a pill out, took it, drank some water, and I shut the glass, you know, like on the cabinet.
Yeah.
And that cabinet shined into my room. And that was the first time in years that I actually saw myself.
Yeah.
And that also shined into my room. And it gave me a glimpse of what I was living in. I'm like, you're living in a crack house.
Yeah.
Your house is a disaster, bro. You're off. And so I remember, like, I'm an A-type guy, right? I get fired up. I was so mad at where I had come. I grabbed the cabinet, opened it up, and then I grabbed every single one of my pills, and I dumped them and flushed it. Wow. But then I'm
That's
like,
serious.
Oh my God.
What did I just do?
I did, man. If I had a scuba suit, I probably would have like tried to get down in there because I started to panic. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never been through withdrawals.
And what was your daily habit like at this time?
I was taking a lot.
Yeah.
I was taking a lot.
And how were you supporting yourself?
I was in retirement.
Oh, you had a solid income.
Oh yeah, and I never paid for a pill.
Okay.
My pills were, every time I go to the doctor, they
So
send
were
me
you selling the pills, or what did that look like?
Yes, I was selling the pills to one of my ex-mission companions. He was, it's kind of a weird story, but he was taking the pills, taking them down, and because I was living in Show Low, a small town in Arizona, and he was taking the pills down, selling them for me, and then bringing me back. He would cut me a little bit of cash, which is asinine for a dude. Why was I doing that?
Yeah.
I was doing, well, I could justify it was more for him, but I was getting extra cash. I'm like, come on,
Who doesn't want extra cash?
Who doesn't want extra cash? So, yeah, I was kind of scraping the bottom a little bit.
Yeah.
But at that point, when I threw everything down the toilet, I'm like, you know what, Brock, you've been talking for years about stopping this.
Yeah.
And this is a good time. Because if I would have had...
Did the cop in you harass you at all throughout this time?
No.
You quieted it all the way down.
He had no voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
But whatever voice was talking to me on that morning said, you're staying in this bathroom until you're done.
Yeah.
And that's where this wasn't the smartest way to handle a detox. Yeah. Like, I don't tell anybody to cold turkey detox. I would never recommend it. It was the worst pain, the worst experience I've ever gone through, but also the most glorious experience. Because I'm in the bathroom for 3 days and I'm defecating on myself. I'm urinating on myself. And I remember at one point, I had this restless leg syndrome. Like, it was hurt so bad I couldn't get in a spot that was comfortable. And I'm on all fours and I'm starting to throw up. And I feel like my backbone is going to shoot out through my mouth. Like, it was that icky. Yep. All the vials coming out. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is bad. So I had a conversation with God. I'm like, okay, God, I'm 3 days into this. I get where you're going. Take me out of this. Let me out of this. And audibly, I heard him. First time I've ever heard God talk to me. People can say, oh, you're hallucinating. I had a conversation with the guy, right? And what I heard was, hey, Brock, if I let you out of this, you're going to go get one pill. All you're going to do is want to get back out of pain, and then it's going to start back over. And in the back of my mind, guess what I was thinking? If I could just have one pill, it will take me out of this pain. I won't be throwing up. I won't feel like this.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh my gosh, this dude is real.
Yeah.
Like he is so close to me. He knows me.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, okay, I'm staying in it. I'm going to stay in it. So 7 days I'm in the bathroom. Now I got to get some water, go downstairs every now and again, but I'm in it.
Yeah.
And finally, I'm like, God, I know you're here. I know you're in control. This is yours. You can have this. But I need to let you know that I can't take this anymore. Like I'm tapped. I have no more energy. I also don't have a desire to use anymore. I'm like done. And I remember saying, okay, God, if you just give me the energy to walk out of this bathroom, I'll be different. My goal will be to change people's lives. But if not, take my life. Because I'm at a pivotal point in my life where I just can't take anymore. Like I was broke.
Yeah.
And within seconds, Ginny, I tell you that this just energy from the feet up came into my body. And I stood up and walked out of that bathroom. Like that 7 days never happened, which is absolutely crazy because I know what went through in that 7 days. I know the anguish, but I walked out and it's been like we talked about, I've had surgeries since then. And I have a refusal that I won't go back and use opiates because I made that commitment to him and to myself that, hey, you're done. You know, there's a difference between being done and finished. I've heard a lot of people like, hey, I finished. I'm finished with that stuff. No, you finish a race and then you have another race and you're going to finish, right? Like when you're done, you're done. Like there's no going back. And that's when I walked out of that bathroom, I said, I'm done. I'm never going back to this. And so that's how I recovered, you know, that was it. I never after that went to meetings. I didn't know about meetings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wasn't in the circuit. I didn't know about recovery. I didn't know about anything. I just knew that I needed a personal relationship with Christ and that I needed to do things different in my life.
No, I love that. I do go to meetings mostly because even though sometimes I like, God, can I be around people that are moving at the same capacity as me? But, you know, I get a lot of reminders, but no, I can identify with all of that and being done and the audible voice and having those conversations and hearing him and understanding what my journey is supposed to be. So I just really value that. I also hope that people that watch this understand that it doesn't matter what we do for a living, how much money we make, what our family looks like, where we were raised, that addiction does not discriminate, and that it is absolutely possible to change where we're at. So yeah, I am a firm believer that aligning ourselves with others moving in a similar direction while also, being of service to others is imperative for my personal recovery. And you've built a world around that. And so talk to me about that. Like how did I know, the inception of this and you and Max, the little bit of the story that you talked about, but how long has Victory Recovery been happening? What are you guys doing here?
So what's interesting is I actually owned for 6 years a inpatient recovery program up north.
Okay.
So for 6 years, I had guys coming in, they lived with us. We had thousands of men come through and get sober, and they're still sober, and I'm still good friends with them today.
Yeah.
But I realized in that process, I did not love the live-in recovery model.
Yeah.
And
why
stick
is
with
that?
me. I know a lot of people are like, that's such a great model. But here's the problem. So you interviewed Zach today.
Yeah.
Okay, a young man like that. Let's talk about Zach. Married, got kids. So if I take Zach and uproot him, and I put him in a 30, 60, 90-day program, right? And he can't see his kids. He's hanging out, and he's grown. He's sober. He's doing a great job in there. He's sober. He's getting the meetings, and everything's just bombarding him with sobriety. Then I take Zach and I take him out of that. You're now graduating. I'm putting you right back in your home. He's never healed a day in his home. He's never healed around his wife who's pissed off at the world for things that he's done during addiction. And so my plan, and when I left that model, I'm like, I got to do it different. I want to get these men and women to heal where they're at, right? Because if you don't ever do that, if you can't figure out how to manipulate those surroundings and those issues and that trauma, really your sobriety is not going to be long lasting, right? You're going to have a low level of retention. And so my thought was, I'm going to hire good people, the right people, right? You've talked about Laura, and we have a Jerry, and we have Max. So there's just good people, right? That want to, it's not just in here. So we get after hour phone calls. We work with the families. We're constantly on the phone. We have meetings, and it's just, it feels like more of a community, right? We talk about 4 reasons that we use, the 4 dimensions of recovery, if you will: home, health, community, purpose. If your home life's off, fix it. If your health, physical, mental, spiritual health, one of those are off or 2 of those are off, fix it, right? If your community, if you're looking around and you're the only sober guy in the room, change it, right? But if you're looking around and it's like, dude, everybody I hang around with sober, they're all pushing and promoting sobriety, like you said, right? Then you're in the right room. And then purpose, like you got to have a reason to get up in the morning. If you don't, you're not going to stay sober real long. And so those are some of the things that we're trying to promote is you got to be able to be sober outside of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how long have you guys been functioning as an outpatient program?
I think we've been in here like a year and a half.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong. A year. But yeah.
Okay. And so for where are you, how are your clients learning about you?
So we're on social media. We do a big TikTok page, Victory Recovery AZ, and we're on Instagram, and we're just in the community. Most of our folks are in our community, and they're referrals.
Okay.
That's where I think that's where we get most people.
Okay.
We do a lot of peer support work where we go out, which hopefully we're going to still do. We go out and we meet people in where they're at.
Yeah.
Prime example, I met a young man at the park. He's full on gangster tattoos. I was a police officer. He's a gangster. I can tell.
Yeah.
Right. I sit down at the table with him and say, hey, what's going on? He's like, man, I relapsed. I'm struggling. I said, what can I do for you? He's like, really nothing. I said, can I pray for you?
Yeah.
I don't pray openly for people. That's just not something I do. But I felt a connection with this kid. And as I pray for him, I look down and he's crying. I'm like, hey, what's going on? He's like, well, I'm actually working to be a pastor in my church. And this threw me off. Yeah. So thank you for that prayer. He goes down the end of the street and overdoses and goes down. Gets rushed to the hospital. I give him my card. He drives by the facility a couple of days later with his wife and said, hey, that's the place, the guy that prayed for me. So he comes in, he becomes a client. He stays here for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. And now he's just got a house. Him and his wife are doing great. The kids. And so it's things like that where you just don't know where you're going to meet these people. You got to meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
Right.
So, okay. And so I'm just going to dig a little bit about the program, how it works, what kind of insurance. So if you meet a guy or a girl on the street and they're interested in participating in the program, what kind of insurance or how do they pay for your services? Yeah, right now we only have one insurance company that we use. The state of Arizona is going through a mad change. I'm sure you've watched the news.
I bet, yeah.
They've shut down a lot of the programs in Arizona because of fraud. So
Oh yeah, I feel like I remember hearing about this.
Big scandal in Arizona. So they've closed the portals down. So we're not really, we're still getting all that process through, but we work under referrals and we work under scholarships. So if someone's like, hey, I want to pay for this kid to come in, then we put it there and we just use that money for that person. So we do get some, just like our van. Yeah. That was actually donated to us.
Oh, that's awesome.
So like a lot of
you guys have a lot of community support.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
We're getting a lot of community support. It's starting to roll now.
That's awesome. That's super awesome. So a client comes in, they're brand new. They just meet you. What's day one look like?
Let's go start working out.
So that's how the day starts. What time does the day start?
8:30 in the morning we start in here. This is the gym that we're at, and so we do a strength workout, and then we do a workout of the day. So a strength and then like a bag workout or whatever we put in front of them. And here's the thing: we want them battling with themselves. We want this to be the hardest thing they do in the day, honestly, because if you do the hardest thing first, whatever you got thrown at me later on, I can handle. So we talk about the two voices that we battle every day. We call them the king voice and the bitch voice, right? I know. But,
I ain't mad at you.
Right? But we have these battles, right? Yeah. And the only place that we've been able to replicate these voices, right, is in the gym and in the cold plunge.
Yeah.
I know it sounds crazy, but those are
No.
the only two places that we can like make that voice come out and talk to us.
Okay.
And that you can audibly hear that voice in, because I heard a voice, right? I think these are important things, that bitch voice talks louder to us.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that's massaged through time. It knows what to say. It knows how to like prick us to act.
Well, and how do you feel? I mean, would you agree with the statement? Society is really helping to bolster the bitch voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
everyone.
Hey, it's okay. You don't have to go through that. You can
Of
quit.
course you are.
Yeah.
Of course you are.
You should be.
You should be.
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to like teach these men and women. Like, you own your stuff. Ownership. You own your addiction. You own your divorce. You own your life, and then you can move on and start changing it.
Yeah.
Rip the monster out. And like, let's expose it. Let's go.
So let's talk about the cold plunge. So the first part of the day starts out with a workout, and then
we run a group.
okay.
We meet together. We debrief what we learned in here, because we have usually some topics in here, and then we go in there. We debrief it hour, 15 minutes. We talk about, hey, what do you need for the day? How can I help you? And then we just get a battle plan for the day, and then they go. And then, I mean, you can ask Laura. She takes probably 15 calls a day. I'm taking calls from parents and moms and the kid. You know, we're just getting, and it's this community that we're trying to build.
Yeah. And so you guys have pretty good relationships with parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so are you guys
They always
running any
love
kind
us,
of support
you know?
group here for the parents?
We do. Tuesday nights, we have parents and loved ones affected by addiction. They come in. And what's cool is we didn't plan it like this, but the family comes in and the person in the program comes in a lot of times. So like you get to like really have some dynamics going on.
Yeah.
So other families get to talk and hear, hey, wait a minute, I'm not alone on this.
It's like victim impact stuff, right? Where it's just like, I think that kind of approach is very restorative, because you get people really starting to understand the different perspectives. Yeah. And so talk to me about this cold plunge. I've heard about the cold plunge multiple times today. So
the cold plunge is just something that we've done a lot of research on it, but it has just mad effects on your body. Dopamine, it gives you a same feeling as like in addiction. It's the kind of the same where everything's just dumping.
Yeah.
Right. And we want to have those voices come out. So we put them in a cold plunge. We start at 41 degrees and we try to keep them in there for 4 minutes. And the goal is to weather that storm, right? If you can stay in a cold plunge for 4 minutes, you can handle any trigger and craving that you get. And so that's kind of the association where you got to be in the moment. You got to be able to like, okay, there you are. I hear that bitch voice talking to me. Get out. It's cold. Your feet hurt. You're tingling. Everything, you hear all that. And then all of a sudden this king voice starts saying, hey, bro, breathe.
Yeah.
Slow it down. Calm down. You're going to make it. And all of a sudden, your life, your mind changes a little bit. And then you start getting the combat breathing coming in. You slow your heart rate down. You're like, whoa, I'm good. And then they realize, man, I just went through 4 minutes of that. But that first 30 seconds was hell.
Yeah.
But think about our triggers, man. It's the same way where it's just bombarding us. We get a fight with our wife. Okay, well, I'm pissed off. I'm going to go use. Well, hold on. Let's stay in that moment for a second. Let's breathe through it. Let's figure out what I'm going through. Let's slow it down. I can handle this. I'm in the moment, right? And then we just handle things differently.
Yeah.
Because we've been there, right? They understand what we're talking about.
Yeah. How many years have you been practicing this kind of process in your
Cold
own life?
plunge?
Just the whole process.
Oh, man.
Because I feel like we develop things based on our own process.
I did a lot of that in Sholo. So I've been doing it for probably 8-9 years.
Yeah.
But it works for me. So what's cool is I've taken things that I learned in the police department, like our tactical plans. We talk about plans every day. Hey, what's your plan? You go home and your wife's drinking and we have, all these situations. What's your plan? What are you going to do? Like, don't tell me your plan. Write your plan down.
Plan isn't a plan unless it's in writing.
Right. Oh, man. Yeah, we talk about that. So I had a guy yesterday. He fell apart, man. Fell apart. He's sitting at the park. He's drinking. I'm like, where's your plan?
Yeah.
Where's your plan? Why aren't you using your plan? I don't have a plan. That's on you, bro. Right?
That's how we end up in these places, right?
And so they get to use that. He'll come back on Monday and say, guys, guess what? On Thursday, I didn't have my plan. Yeah. Guess what I'm going to have today? I'm going to have a written down plan. And I'm going to use that plan. And so it's just little things like that.
Yeah.
And then we got Laura. Laura, she comes in with her stuff.
Yeah.
And she teaches that. We got Max, who played in the NFL, and he brings his mental toughness into it. So it's just like they're getting some really cool different elements.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I really love that, and I have developed stuff myself along similar lines, and so and the plan is part of the biggest thing, and I like to consider the worst possible situation, and then what is my plan to get out of that situation? Because we do those things as people, especially once we've been in addiction. I feel like we
Think about how good we were in addiction to get the pills.
well, that's what I'm saying. And that's one of the things that I try to work with people about is just like, oh no, you had skills, qualities, abilities, and behaviors that got you all the way to here. So let's stop disqualifying ourselves because it's not for the faint of heart to get to these places. So let's take the framework and let's just put the details on that actually help us to stop shooting ourselves in the foot, right? You already have what it takes.
Yeah.
And so, just helping people develop that process, slow yourself down enough, learn how to breathe. You can get through this. Just sit still. Just don't do anything until it's time to execute.
We call that our oh shit plan.
Yeah.
That's what it's called. Like,
Well, and if you have it planned out, then when it happens, guess what happens? You know what? You already know what you're going to do. So there it is.
It's a condition. We want to train to a conditioned response
Yes, absolutely.
every day. That's what it needs to be.
Well, we all function in patterns. The human species functions in patterns, whether we recognize that we do or not. We typically all fall back on our foundational learning until we've, implemented something. And I've got an opportunity to speak with some of your guys today about how their foundational learning transitioned into these other things, but then they get to recreate their patterns, right?
Hopefully they were good conversations.
Oh no, they were fantastic. They were really fantastic, honestly. One of the things that I really appreciate about the folks that you had talk to us today, which mind you, it's all the Arizona interviews, is that it is possible to get off of fentanyl.
Yeah.
So well, there's a huge message going across our nation saying you can't.
No.
Well, that message is going across the nation in a lot of specific things, not just fentanyl, but they can't.
Yeah.
Well, you can't. Well, yeah, you can. And so I really value, of course, I've valued you since the first time you made me cry on camera.
Yes.
And you know what I mean? Like if you can reach me here, like we're connected. And one of the things that I really appreciate is I recognize how, God, higher power, Heavenly Father, however anybody wants to identify that power that's so much greater than ourselves, how he works in a similar fashion in people's lives that have never, ever even met each other, right? Because we know about each other, but I don't know what I don't know what you're teaching, what you've implemented. And I just really love when I get the opportunity to recognize the connections and what he's done in my life and how he's manifested the same kind of stuff in your life. And so, and how we get to utilize those things to guide other folks to the path that they've been searching for. And so, because, at the end of the day, I can't save anybody.
Yeah.
All I can do is show you how I save myself. That's it. I can teach you how to do it. And if you're willing to do hard things that only feel hard in the beginning, then, you have then taught yourself that, yes, you can.
Yeah. It's still powerful.
Yeah. And it's simple and not easy all the time.
Oh, it's not easy.
But possible.
Yeah, we can do it.
Right?
Thousands of people are getting sober every day.
Well, and that is a fact. And I think that, a nation has been convinced that you just might as well quit because there's no way out. And thank you for creating a way out.
Yeah.
Thank you for creating a way out and sharing, your own experience and trusting that process. So you do a lot of work on the streets. Again, like, even though our interactions are sporadic, I always know where I can come to for certain things. And I always feel like I'm talking to my brother every time I reach out to you. And I always get an opportunity to see the work that you're doing. And so I would really love for you to take us out. Let's
go.
Let's do some stuff.
Let's go.
All right. Well, I'm going to need a hug before we walk out of here.
Thank you. For sure.